Now, for more on what it will take for U.S. banks to become more comfortable with Colorado's booming marijuana business, I spoke with Gregory Millman. He's a columnist with the Wall Street Journal's Risk and Compliance Journal.
There are a lot of risks for banks in getting into this business. There are risks involving money laundering. There are a lot of also, if they do get into the business and abide by the restrictions in the memo, they have to do a lot of extra monitoring, a lot of extra record keeping. And the liabilities, if they don't do that record keeping and someone does something wrong, they could be in great trouble. Even legal businesses are having trouble with banks over money laundering, money transfer businesses. Even embassies are having trouble keeping their bank accounts because of the record keeping under money laundering laws. So marijuana businesses which are illegal and have extra record keeping requirements, you would expect the banks to be at least as reluctant as they are for those other businesses.
Right, so can the federal government do anything more to smooth the way for the banks, or is it now left to basically Congress to change the law?
Well, of course, Congress is part of the federal government, and as soon as this memo came out, Senator Grassley made a statement that only Congress can change these laws. The Department of Justice does not have the power to change laws. And a number of banks looked at that and said, well, what happens if there's another presidential administration, another attorney general, a change of mind, a change of heart? This memo is not going to protect a bank if 2 years or 5 years down the line, some attorney general or some U.S. attorney decides that that bank wasn't really acting in accordance with the guidance. They're really afraid of what might happen on the next watch.
Right.
And that is a legitimate fear.
Okay, here's an interesting little scenario. The banks may say, look, the money that is being raised by these businesses selling marijuana is money that is gained from crime, and putting it through a bank and making it legal is actually money laundering. But if the state is taking money in taxes from these businesses and then putting it into a bank, does that change it at all?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a question that's been raised. It's a question that hasn't been answered. But the problem here is that marijuana is illegal under federal law. It's a Schedule I controlled substance. Some states have legalized it. The states have legalized it in different ways. Sometimes it's medical marijuana, sometimes it's recreational, sometimes there are licenses required, sometimes not. So there's a real hodgepodge of regulations and sort of shades of legality involved here. A few days after the guidance came down, there were a number of stories about people in Texas buying marijuana from Colorado by mail, having marijuana mailed to them. Well, it's illegal in Texas. If a Texas Attorney General decided to put a stop to that, and if a bank were serving the Colorado retailer that sold the marijuana, it could very easily develop into the bank being out of business.
Okay. Okay, one final question, Greg, and I know this is a really tough one. Can you hazard a guess on what this industry is worth?
Oh, there have been a range of estimates. It's really impossible to put an exact figure on it. It's worth a lot. In Colorado, the tax receipts from the business are vastly exceeding expectations. There's a substantial sales tax on marijuana in Colorado. In Washington as well, there are great expectations. No one knows for sure. It's complex because it's not really possible to look at the illegal marijuana market and transfer that to the legal market, because in the legal market, the marijuana might be cheaper. If it's cheaper, more people might use it. It's potentially a very big business.
That was Gregory Millman, senior columnist with the Wall Street Journal's Risk and Compliance Journal. He was talking to me earlier.